So hi everyone and welcome to the new edition of We Are Sunderland with myself, Scott Wilson and Dom Shaw, coming to you as always in association with our sponsors, which are the Fans Museum and Cospex Opticians. Massive thank you to them. Thanks for tuning in. Hopefully you're watching on the YouTube channel or you're listening on one of the podcast platforms. Great to have you along. Well done, we're nearly there. We are nearly there. You've got the delights of a trip to Bristol City coming up in the next 24 hours. We're recording this on Thursday morning. I was at Regis Le Bris's press conference yesterday, so we'll have a bit of a chat about that. We'll obviously talk Bristol City. I'm sure we'll talk team selection and all of that. But it's a funny stage of the season at the minute for Sunderland. There's no getting round it, is there?
Weird was the word Le Bris used last week, and you can't argue with that, can you?
No.
It does just feel like we want these next 4 games to pass and to get on with it now, doesn't it? To have games that matter again. I do think in the last 1 or 2 games that there might be a bit more of a feel of right. We could really do with going in the playoffs with a bit of momentum, with a bit of a boost, with a bit of a pick me up. But I mean, you were at Le Bris yesterday, and we'll obviously discuss that. He's not going to change his approach, is he, this weekend in terms of tinkering with his squad, rotating his squad? And I thought last week was revealing in that on last Friday, we went to speak to Le Bris, and he was saying then we're going to be in trouble if we think we can switch off. You can't turn form on and off. We need to finish the season as well as we can. It's important to go into the playoffs with momentum, all that sort of stuff that you'd expect. Then after the home defeat to Swansea, it did feel for the first time really, he kind of went stronger the other way in that, yes, we don't want to lose games. We're disappointed to lose games. But most important now for us, for me, is ensuring we have got our best players as fresh as possible for the end of the season. And you were at the academy yesterday when his message was very similar.
Yeah, that was definitely the message yesterday. You know, a number of things. I think firstly, what I would say is, I think you're right. I think we're going to see quite a lot of rotation in the 2 games this weekend. I mean, to be fair, 2 games in 3 days, you would probably see a fair degree of rotation anyway. Probably not so much at the back, because Sunderland still don't have a lot of the defensive players fit. And we'll get on to who's fit and who isn't in a minute. But certainly in midfield and the forward positions, I think you're probably going to see pretty much a totally different team at Bristol City as we'll line up against Blackburn. Then, though, I think for the last 2 games of the season, I think we will start to see something much more like the first choice team. Now, you know, Le Bris did say at one point yesterday in the press conference, look, don't just assume that the team that plays the last game against QPR will be the team that starts the playoff semi-final first leg. But I think it'll be somewhere close. And I think that for those last 2 games, Le Bris is seeing that as, right, okay, now we need to get the team back together, and B, we could do with a positive result or 2 here just to be going into it. I think he's willing to, you know, he would bridle at the term write-off, and I'm sure the players would bridle at the term write-off. And I absolutely am sure that the 2,000-odd Sunderland fans who are making the trek down to Bristol City won't be very happy with the idea of writing off, and I fully understand that. But the brutal reality is the next 2 games, he pretty much is writing off. Doesn't matter. But I think there is a sense that, okay, well, come the last couple of games, at the very least, we need to be getting the team back together and get a bit of cohesion back again.
What identity-wise then, who do you think, who did he suggest yesterday is going to play tomorrow, and who will play on Monday?
So the suggestion seemed to be, so Bellingham first, back in the squad, on the bench tomorrow, will start Monday, as long as, you know, he'll come off the bench, one would imagine, late on at Bristol City, as long as he comes through that fine. And obviously it hasn't really been an injury issue. He's had a few niggles. It's been a bit of fatigue. They've really given him a rest, haven't they? So he should be absolutely fine. I think he'll start Monday. Lefebvre having suggested earlier in the week, in the immediate aftermath of the weekend game, that he'd probably be on the bench again at Bristol City. I got the impression yesterday he might well start the Bristol City game. Right. Certainly going to start one of them. I think he might start at Bristol City. So if I was to have a guess, and this is just a guess really, I'd suggest that the midfield 3 at Bristol City might be Neil, Rigg, and Lefebvre. Lefebvre in a kind of 10 position to see how that goes. And then on Monday, Dan Neil's going to get a rest in one of the 2 games, which he obviously hasn't had yet. So I think Monday we could see a complete flip, and we could be talking Job, maybe Brown, depending on whether he's got to play at fullback or not, and Samed. He's going to start one of the games. So I think we'll see certainly 2 of the 3 change, maybe all 3. You would imagine Isidor starts one game up front, Mayenda starts the other up front. Watson will start one, won't he? Maybe Mayenda will play off the left for one of the games. Like I say, I think that front, 6, we're going to see an awful lot of rotation in these next 2 games. But Neil will play one of them. Joe will start one of them. Lefebvre will start one of them. And at least we're going to see them back. And then the other thing at the back, he did say Dennis Serkin won't be in the squad at Bristol City, but should be in the squad for Blackburn, presumably on the bench. So again, we might well see Serkin for a little bit of that Blackburn game, which at least then means he's in the equation for the last 2 games of the season.
We'll get to the defense.
Still no Ballard yet. He will be back before the end of the season. Seemed to be the strong suggestion.
As Le Bris suggested last week, could be Adji Elise and Niall Huggins. Now we don't expect either of those to play any prominent part in the playoffs, given how long they've been out. But hellfire, the options that Le Bris could suddenly find himself having back.
Yeah, well, all of a sudden, you're not having to shuffle Hume across, are you? You're not having to use Alan Brown as an emergency fullback. You've got your options back. I still think that because of how long Ballard's been out, I still think come that first game of the playoff semi-final, if everyone's available, Hume, Metham, O'Neill, Serkin, feels like the back 4, doesn't it?
Yeah, we were having this conversation at the stadium last week. I still think it'd be fascinating to see what Le Bris would do if Ballard is back in a fortnight, say, and then has 3-4 weeks before a Wembley final, hypothetically. Who'd play in the Wembley final? Like, my instinct, and I might be wrong on this, my instinct still says Ballard and O'Neill, but I think Metham's been Sunderland's Player of the Year.
Yeah, I think O'Neill plays.
Yeah,
I think he'd stick with Metham, but we'll see. We'll see. Yeah.
Well, hopefully we'll see. In the midfield, you mentioned Dan Neil there. He's the one who, for me, is screaming out, "Give me a rest." It looked like he could do with one. I've just looked there. He started 41 of 42 games.
Yeah, the only one he missed was after the sending off right back in August, wasn't it? Yeah.
With the suspension. He looks like he'd need it. Will one game be enough, do you think? Do you think just having him sit out of one?
I think he's the type of player who all players would want to play, wouldn't they? I think he's the type of player who does enjoy, gets into a rhythm and will enjoy playing. I think, let's assume he starts Saturday and then he's given the complete rest of the weekend off, no training, don't turn up to the game on Monday, have a bit of family time, whatever, totally relax, back into training, Wednesday, Thursday the following week. That feels like a reasonable kind of break at this stage of the season, doesn't it? And then, he might not play 90 minutes of both the 2 final league games. He probably won't, will he? Given that there's Samed there to get a few more minutes into, and like I say, Brown becomes a midfield option again if once you get your defenders back. So, I think it probably is enough.
The Isidor Mayenda dynamic's interesting, isn't it? Because if Isidor is going to be the main man, and I don't think that's nailed on anymore in the playoffs, but I think you'd still probably go there, wouldn't you? I don't think he's benefited from being in and out over the course of the last couple of months. It's 9 appearances now, and it is appearances rather than the games, because some of them have been cameos, some of them he's barely featured in, but it's 9 appearances without a goal. I know this is a simple and lazy thing to say about a striker, but it does look like he could do with one, doesn't he? And I just wonder whether continuing to rotate him in and out between the end of the season. It might be Mayenda for me has looked Sunderland's best striker over the course of the last couple of months, but I don't know. Le Bris was asked about it last week, and he still he was asked about it after the Swansea game actually, and still talked about how he loves what Isidor brings to the side. Well, he doesn't judge it just on goals. We thought he played well last week, but I just wonder how beneficial it is for him to be in and out. What do you reckon?
Yeah, he was asked, Le Bris, yesterday, kind of, you've talked about the need to keep players fit. You've talked about the need to keep players fresh. We've talked about momentum and stuff. But, are there actually places up for grabs here between now and the end of the season? And no manager's ever at this point going to say, no, I know my team. But, but Le Bris, interestingly, did say, yes, in a couple of positions. And it feels like one of them is definitely up top, doesn't it? Centre half, yeah, maybe an option. We know who's going to play in goal. We pretty much know who's going to play at full back. I think we probably know that the midfield, where Lefebvre plays is a bit of an interesting one, isn't it? And what that means for the rest of the midfield, that's got to sort itself out. But we pretty much know the people who are going to be in there in some way, shape, or form. It's like you say up top, feels like, is Isidor nailed on anymore? Probably not. But I think Lefebvre wants to play Isidor as his main striker. I think he thinks that suits the rest of the team better, and it probably does, to be fair. But you're right; he has just looked a little bit out of touch. And there have been periods earlier in the season when he's not been scoring, when he's snatched at things, and he hasn't looked the same player as when when he's in the groove and the chances are going away. So, yeah. I suspect Isidor will start 3 of the last 4 games, and part of that will be in Le Bris's thinking like let's get a goal into him. Let's try and get some rhythm into him because I still think he will be the starting striker, all things being equal, for the playoff semi-final.
And the other thing there, if you're talking about a couple of positions, well, the other one, and this links with Lefebvre, I think it's the left flank.
Yeah.
Now, Romain Mundle, Le Bris said yesterday that the hope is he'll be back for the playoffs, but he won't have played for 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks in the build-up to it. Now, in the ideal world, you get him back the week or 2 before and you get a little bit of football under his belt beforehand. But the hope is Mundle's going to be back. What do you do between now and then? Tommy Watson has started the last 2 games and underwhelmed, and Le Bris has been pretty clear that he thinks those displays have got nothing to do with the imminent Brighton transfer. He said, and I tend to agree with him, he was an inexperienced winger before he got injured. Now he's an inexperienced winger who's coming back from a 4-month injury off. It's going to take time for him to get up to speed. But he was booed by some supporters when he went off against Swansea in the second half on Saturday. What do you do with Watson between now and the end of the season? Do you keep him? Or, I know Le Bris doesn't want to play him there, but Lefebvre was hugely effective on that side.
That's exactly where I was going to go back to. That, I think there's scope for having another look at Mayenda there, because I think Mayenda's, had some good games in the wide positions. I think there's probably scope for having another look at that. So it wouldn't surprise me if in one of the games between now and the end of the season we see Isidor and Mayenda together, but not as a front 2 with Mayenda pulled out wide. But for all that Le Bris has said, look, Lefebvre was bought as a number 10. He is a number 10. That's where I want him. I get that. It's exciting to think what he could be there, because he's clearly got the technical ability to play that role, and could rip up the Championship as a number 10. He looks that good, doesn't he? But he did well playing on the left-hand side. All right, not his natural position, but he's a good enough footballer that he doesn't look like a duck out of water playing on the left-hand side in the Championship. He's more than good enough to do that. And what him playing there means is you get Rig, Job, and Neil in the same midfield doing the jobs that they've done really well for the vast majority of the season. Because, all right, you play Lefebvre as a 10. Well, that has to have implications for what Job's doing. It probably has implications for whether Rig's getting in the team. You are having to shuffle things around there. Whereas, Lefebvre on the left, while it's not the same as having Mundle there, I take that. He plays that role differently. I still think Sunderland look really good with him there. I think it's an option. I don't think it's out of the question that if Romain Mundle is not either fit at all or fully fit, that Lefebvre starts on the left-hand side in a playoff semi-final. I don't think that's out of the question yet.
And we started this by talking about the strange situation Sunderland find themselves in the table. It's similar with Watson, isn't it? This situation with Watson is quite unique as well.
Yeah, it is messy, isn't it? Let's be honest, because the booing wasn't massive, was it? It wasn't outlandish, but it was audible. And you would imagine if he has another bad game, it might get even more pronounced. And that's not a healthy situation to be in, given how big these games are. And you know, he's an 18-year-old kid. He's a young kid who's barely got any football experience, but certainly hasn't got any kind of experience of anything like this. So, yeah, it feels like it's through no fault of anyone's, really. Watson wants to move. I know some fans will say he's biting the hand that feeds him, all of that, but ultimately he's a player who wants to move to the Premier League. Sunderland have decided that, look, this is happening. We need to take the money because we can't risk him getting injured, and potentially he then goes and talks to overseas clubs in January for nothing. I understand that. Once it's agreed, you've kind of got to make it public, because otherwise, you know what football's like. It gets out. Le Bris is being asked about it every game. He's in an uncomfortable position. So I kind of understand why it's happened, but it is messy. There's no denying that. And it's, of course, sod's law that Mundle then gets injured, and all of a sudden, you know, from being a hypothetical, well, it's not anymore because Watson's there in the team. So, yeah, even if whether Mundle is fit or not, I'd be surprised if Tommy Watson started the playoff semi-final first leg. Unless there's a whole host of other injuries around the midfield and Le Bris is having to make, you know, do loads of things he wouldn't ideally want to do. I don't think Watson starts that game.
No, I don't. The Championship table then, and Sunderland's remaining fixtures, there they are running across the bottom there. Bristol City away on Good Friday, Blackburn home Easter Monday, Oxford away, QPR home. There's absolutely no doubt about it that the toughest of those 4 remaining games is Friday's trip to Ashton Gate. I mean, the last 3, let's be honest, look as kind as you can get in the Championship. Blackburn at home, or Blackburn are done. Oxford away. Oxford might well be safe by then. I think the 6 points clear now, but there's several teams below them. QPR home. QPR are going to have nothing to play for on the final day either. But Bristol City, absolutely everything to play for. I mean, it could be a dress rehearsal, couldn't it, of the playoffs?
Well, that's the interesting dynamic. And again, kind of, you know, Le Bris was asked a few things around that yesterday, and I mean, he kind of said it won't matter. You know, we're going to be a different team. They'll be a different team. The dynamic of a playoff game will be totally different. Yeah, I buy that. But if you're Sunderland and you go down there with a half-interested team and get beat 4-0 tomorrow, that has to have some degree of an impact heading into play. Even if it just gets Bristol City's fans excited.
Even if it just lifts them.
Yeah, you know, I take his point that it's not, you know, what happens tomorrow is not going to decide what happens in a 2-leg playoff semi-final if they end up playing each other. But I don't think you can completely dismiss it as irrelevant. I think there will be something, you know, something on it potentially. And it's a really difficult game for Sunderland. You know, whatever team they put out, whatever they're doing, Bristol City are pretty much the form home team in the entire division. And, you know, and have absolutely everything to play for. So it's got the makings of a difficult afternoon, I think, for Sunderland.
Well, I was going to say that there's 12 points between them in the table, and that's basically because of Sunderland's away form. Sunderland have picked up 11 more points away from home than Bristol City this season. Only the Championship's top 4 have better home records than Bristol City, who've won 12, drawn 6, and lost only 3 of their 21 home games. They've only picked up a point fewer than Sunderland at home. And tomorrow, Friday's game is absolutely massive for them, isn't it? It's huge when you look at, so the tape below Sunderland, obviously you've got Bristol City 5th, 64 points, Coventry 6th, 63, West Brom and Middlesbrough 7th and 8th on 60, Millwall 9th also on 60, but with an inferior goal difference. A win for Bristol City tomorrow, and they might not have one foot in, but certainly a couple of toes.
Couple of toes, yeah. Well, the thing is as well, if you're Bristol City and you're a Bristol City fan or a player or you know, management there, you're looking at Sunderland and their performances and results in the last couple of weeks, and the fact that Le Bris yesterday was pretty openly saying it's going to be mix and match for both these games over the weekend. For all that Sunderland are above you in the table, for all that Sunderland are having a great season, you're looking at tomorrow's games thinking this is a brilliant opportunity for us. We're playing a team who, you know, have pretty much admitted they've only got half an eye on the ball here. We need to be winning this. So I fully expect them to come absolutely flying out the traps. I think they'll be full of intensity. They'll be pressing all over the place. And like I say, you know, mentally, Sunderland are going to be somewhere near being on it, because otherwise they could get blown away tomorrow.
Like they did at Coventry in the last game.
Very much like they did at Coventry, yeah.
Like this. How do you see it playing out? I mean, that's the fear of how it could, but how do you see it playing out?
I think Bristol City will win, hand on heart. You know, and that, you know, if Sunderland were going down full strength, full tilt, I think it would be a completely different game. The mood around Sunderland at the minute, and the fact that, like I say, Le Bris is, you know, I don't want to say written off because that's not fair to him, but has definitely indicated that these next 2 games will be experimental and it's about keeping players fresh. And I just think Bristol City, like I say, their motivation levels could not be any higher, whatever. So, yeah, I think Sunderland might get beat tomorrow. 3-1, something like that.
I think at this stage of the season, it's often wise to, if a team that needs a win is playing a team that doesn't need a win. I know this is real stupidly oversimplistic, and this is from a man who has lost far more fourfolds than he's won on Saturday afternoon this season. But you tend to sway towards the team that have the urgency.
Which is why there's been such worry is not really the right word either, but you know, concern, I think, over amongst the fan base of the way that Sunderland are approaching this. Now, it's couched in the fact that there's an understanding of why they're doing it. And I thought Le Bris, sorry, just to put one more fact in, was interesting yesterday when he made a real point of saying, look, you know, I wasn't here 2 years ago, but I've spoken to a lot of people who were. I've spoken to players, I've spoken to staff, and all the consensus was that Sunderland completely ran out of steam when they went into the playoffs 2 seasons ago. And he said, I understand why that happened. You know, they didn't have the luxury that we've got now. They were chasing the playoffs right up until the last kick of the ball at Preston on the last day of the season. So they had to play the same players week in, week out, over and over and over again in that last month of the season. And what it meant was, we know what it meant, don't we? You got crucial injuries to key defenders. You ended up with Jack Clark and Patrick Roberts playing wing backs at Kenilworth Road. And Sunderland couldn't get to Wembley. So I understand why he's doing what he's doing. But, you know, the pain along the way is that results and performances have dipped. That's just undeniable.
I think Bristol City will win on Friday. But I think Sunderland might then, I think they'll beat Blackburn on Easter.
Yeah, I was going to say, we won't be doing another vid probably in between over the weekend because the turnaround's just too quick. But I'm with you. I think they'll lose at Bristol City and I think they'll beat Blackburn. And then I think that'll just steady the ship a bit. And then in the last 2 games, it'll be right, okay, the team's back together. Let's see how we're going to be getting into these playoffs. But I'm with you. I think lose at Bristol City, beat Blackburn.
Well, I'm making the trip down there on Friday, so keep your eyes on We Are Sunderland, obviously, throughout the day on Friday and over the course of the week.
Buy him a latte in the services.
Yeah, absolutely.
The supporters' buses, he'll be somewhere making the same trek as you.
Well, I'll be. The little ones are coming with me, not to the game. They're. I'm not just leaving them in Bristol, by the way. My missus is coming as well. I'm not just, so the 4.5-hour journey or whatever it is with a 5-year-old and an 18-month-old could be. I'll need that coffee, I think.
Get the iPad charged up. Get the iPad charged up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So keep your eyes anyway on We Are Sunderland over the course of the weekend. Obviously, as Scott said at the start, thanks to our partners, the Fans Museum, Cospex Opticians. Thanks to you for watching, supporting, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you're listening on your podcast platforms, then rate and review there as well. And we'll be back next week to reflect on the Bristol City and Blackburn games, to look ahead to Oxford in the final couple of games.
Well, I'll just jump in. One thing I will say, if you're a subscriber to the YouTube channel, then we're going to be doing a few more shorts, kind of quick video clips after press conferences, after games, before games, all that kind of stuff. So just make sure you keep an eye on them and don't miss them, because they'll be kind of snap reactions to things that are happening between now and hopefully the trophy being lifted at Wembley.
I might do one on the way down tomorrow, the madness of the journey.
That'll go down well.
Life on the road.
Life on the road, yeah. Beautiful.
Yeah. Keep your eyes peeled on them. Scott did one from the academy yesterday on Joe Bellingham's update and the team news ahead of Bristol City. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled on the channel, and there'll be plenty of that to come over the course of the last few weeks. And you never know, hopefully it'll finish with a shot of Sunderland celebrating on the Wembley pitch on May the whatever.
That would be nice.
Brilliant. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Enjoy your weekend. Safe travels if you're making the trip on Friday. Take care.